In this video, I'll tell you why I think that mixing detachments in Warhammer 40,000 8th edition is really cool. So it's coming up on a year since the launch of Warhammer 40,000 8th edition, and I just got back from LVO, and there was a bit of a kerfuffle, not at the convention itself. There was just a lot of online talk, and it's been building as the kind of tournament scene goes on, and I'm not going to really talk about it too much because I don't play competitively. I don't play in tournaments, so I'd be kind of, talking about stuff that I really don't have a handle on. So let it be said that some people don't like the way that when you build an army list, you can mix your detachments and have kind of, they think, pick and choose or cherry pick the best units, put them all together into one big mix of an army. They think that that's bad. They think you should stay faction pure, and other people think that that's silly and you should be able to do what you want. And again, as it relates to tournaments and all that kind of stuff, that's not really my area, so I'm not going to really say much about it. But there's other places you can look online if you're interested in that sort of thing. No, what I'm talking about is the kind of hobby and thematic side of what's going on here. Now, so for those of you who are relatively new to Warhammer or have not yet thought about jumping in or have thought about it but aren't quite there or whatever, it used to be, back in the old days, kind of, and by old days for me, I mean like 5th edition, because I didn't really play before that, but when I first started in 5th edition, you built an army, and that army was your army. Full stop, pretty much. Like, I built Tau, and I could have not said, you know what, I think that it would be really cool if I could put something else in there. If I would have decided I want to be Space Marines, I also want to mix in somebody else who should hang out with the Space Marines, let's say, like, I don't know, the Imperial Guard, that was kind of a no-no, basically. You didn't, I mean, if you and your friends wanted to screw around, sure, knock yourself out. But if you were looking to have, like, official kind of points play, that was not a thing. Then in 6th edition, they came up with the idea of allies, and they had this weird matrix that showed you, like, well, these guys can be this kind of ally with these guys. And these guys are like, not exactly allies, but they can be. These guys, it was this whole weird matrix full of weird symbols, and you needed a slide rule. It was not necessarily my thing either. It was a smart idea to some degree because it allowed you as the hobbyist to be able to say, so I've built my army, whatever army it is, and it looks like, according to this chart, if I'm interested in dabbling a little bit with, I don't know, say Grey Knights, I could add Grey Knights to my regular Ultramarines kind of as an ally group, and then I could just have like a squad of them doing cool stuff over here, and then I get to paint it, Grey Knights, which I've never painted, and that's sort of a cool thing. That was kind of the idea behind the allies thing. And from, again, what I've heard, there were people who said that it broke tournaments and this and that and whatever. And then 7th edition came along, and things went real squirrely as far as tournaments were concerned. And yeah. So when 8th came along, they decided to do away with that allies matrix, and they basically kind of gave you some rules in matched play, which is points play, and also to some degree in narrative, and they said in the book that this is how you do it. So in the big book here, it talks a lot about, in the matched area, battle-forged armies. And part of the whole idea of being a battle-forged army is that you have to follow specific rules. At the bottom of every data sheet for every different unit in the game, there's a whole bunch of different keywords that can be used in a whole bunch of different ways throughout the course of your gaming career. Some keywords are designed so that you can have like a psychic spell that affects these people but doesn't affect these people, or it does this that it doesn't do that. That's kind of what the keywords are for. And in making a battle-forged army, you are supposed to kind of stick with specific faction keywords. So Imperial armies can include Inquisitors, Imperial Guard, Space Marines of many different chapters and flavors. Let me see, what else? The Primaris guys, of course, which are really just basically Space Marines, just, bigger. Adeptus Mechanicus, all those different kind of groups can all technically, because they all work for the same guy, the Emperor, they can all pretty much kind of play together and be in the same army. Now, they can't just hang out and be in the same army. You have to have detachments that says, well, this detachment is these guys in this detachment. And there are reasons and rules and why you would do that. Generally because, if you have an ability that affects everybody of this type, and then you put people in there that are not that type, the ability will not affect them. For just synergy's sake, you want to kind of generally try to keep these things together. And again, as a non-competitive player, I still see the benefit of saying, well, I shouldn't try to just do it this way completely because it's, I think, cool. I should sort of try to maybe attach myself to the rules to some degree. Unless you're playing just totally open play for funsies, then that's a different story altogether. But if you're trying to play something and you're keeping track of the actual points so that I have 1,500 points and you have 1,500 points, generally, depending on your opponent, you may want to stick together on, what the rules are and sort of, follow them from the book. But one of the big benefits of this, being able to, with certain armies, admittedly, mix kind of things together, is it allows you to, it's almost like when you go to a buffet, okay? When you go to a buffet, some people go there just because they just want to pound food down their throat until they're very angry with themselves. And that's fine. I mean, it's not really a good idea, frankly, but I'm not going to tell them not to, I guess, specifically. But some people, like myself, like to go to a buffet because then I can mix and match and try a whole bunch of weird things. It's not like you go to a regular restaurant and you're like, I would like fries, but also onion rings. A lot of places are like, well, we can give you fries or onion rings. But when you go to a buffet, you can put ice cream on top of your onion rings for all they care. It doesn't matter. So in this situation, doing the kind of buffet thing, I can, in my army, mix a bunch of these Primaris aggressors in with the cool, fun 50s Castellan robots. And that's part of my plan. I'm building a 2,000-point Primaris army, which I've talked about a couple of times here on the show. And eventually, I'm going to be adding some Adeptus to it so that I can kind of dial back the Primaris maybe to about, say, 1,500 points, and then throw in 1,000 points of Adeptus Mechanicus, including a knight, of course, an Imperial Knight, you gotta, and then be able to build and paint and do all the fun stuff that I want to do, putting those two armies together. They look super cool on the table, and then I'll be able to have a 200 or 2,050 2,500 point army and be able to do cool stuff with it. And it's, again, not about trying to win competitions or win tournaments. It's more about, I love the fact of having these crazy 50s robots hanging out next to these weird sort of real chunky missiles on their heads kind of Space Marines, and have them, doing cool stuff together and being bros. That's really what I'm looking for. And to be honest, the fluff backs it up. The trick with the Imperium, at least, and to some degree also Chaos in the fluff, is that if you read any of the books, usually Space Marines show up, but they show up because the Imperial Guard are already there doing the things that they do, which is mostly get shot down in droves. But, still, there's a need for that in the army. And then, at some point, maybe some Inquisitor dude shows up, or maybe, I don't know, some Adeptus Mechanicus or whatever. You get any of these kind of groups together. They're working together all for one, for the most part, common cause, though generally, according to most of the books that I read from Black Library, every group's kind of got their own sort of agenda. But, that's true really today as well, as opposed to 38,000 years from now. So, good to know not much changes. The fact is that you can mix and match and move these things together. And it's, again, like I said, backed up in the fluff. You also have the exact same thing on Chaos. You have Chaos Space Marines who, those chapters work together and do stuff. You've got Chaos Demons who kind of sort of do a lot of times what the Chaos Space Marines tell them to, or sometimes it's vice versa, where the Chaos Demons are telling the Space Marines what to do. And you have those sort of things kind of melded together, and you can do that as well in your list. Now, the one bummer, unfortunately, though, for most Xenos players is there's not a lot of mixing back and forth in matched play. I don't know that it is legal in matched play to have a Tyranid army with a detachment of orcs, let's say, or Tau, or Eldar for that matter. You had a little bit of that in the old Allies system. There were a couple little things where people could play together. I mean, technically, I think that Dark Eldar and regular Eldar, Light Eldar? But anyway, I think they can detach, certainly, then work that direction, but they both had the word Eldar in them. You'd hope they could. I just don't think that you could have, mostly an army of Necrons and then also some Tau. In open play, again, all bets are off. You do what you like. And even if you want to play matched play and you and your friend are like, yeah, let's just do it this way, that's always cool. But generally, when you're trying to meet up with somebody new, let's say at the shop that you're going to play with, or you find somebody, let's say, on an app where you can find different gamers and such. You may want to still probably try to stick to the rules a little bit more closely until you get to the point where the two of you can start getting kind of crazy with the way you build your lists and do all kinds of fun stuff just to see what'll happen. Because for me specifically, I love to play games to see what's going to happen. That's why I'm such a big fan of playing open in Age of Sigmar. Like when it was first announced, there were no points. There was no kind of match play, so you just sort of played open. And there were a lot of people that were like, "Oh, we got to figure out a way to fix this and put points on it." Yeah, that's fine. But you didn't have to. The other thing, again, that this really brings to my mind from Age of Sigmar is that in Age of Sigmar, there are basically no rules. In match play, there are. And in most metas, like in our local area, you can mix all kinds of stuff together as long as it's all within the same Grand Alliance. In Age of Sigmar, for those of you that don't play, there are four Grand Alliances. There's Order, there's Chaos, there's Destruction, and there's Death. So you can have, dwarves, elves, and Stormcast all in one army because they are technically all, they're the same Grand Alliance. You can have zombies and skeletons and and Nagash and all kinds of stuff together in one army because they're all Death. They have, in the most recent General's Handbook, they kind of started to make some tweaks to that where there are special allies, because the downside and the way that they do it, not only in that but also in 40k, is, again, the keywords. Like any kind of power that I put out that affects Nurgle units in my army, which is generally Nurgle-based chaos, it will be fine against other Nurgle units. It won't hurt them, but it might hurt my Skaven, or it might hurt my Beastmen, or whatever, depending on the keywords. So they're doing that same thing, and they've pulled a lot of that over to 40k. So basically, one of the things that I really like about the 8th edition 40k, now that we're almost a year in, is the ability to mix and match your detachments. It doesn't work for everybody, like I said, but as a guy who plays both Chaos and also plays Imperium, I kind of get the best of both worlds in this situation, especially with the Imperium. You can have a Vindicare Assassin along with a bunch of Steel Legion from the Imperial Guard, along with a whole bunch of Electro Priests, from the Scutari or whatever, and you can mix everything together. Again, you kind of have to have separate detachments if you're going to try to play match play and work it together that way. But then it helps you to kind of, at least in my mind, sort of build the bigger narrative, build the bigger story, and it reminds me a lot of the fluff. It reminds me a lot of the books, the things that are in books like this, and also in the Black Library books, the novels and such. It reminds me of, and it kind of helps me build a bigger story, and motivationally, it allows me to be not just stuck painting one army within my overall army. I can do these guys who are, let's say, mostly blue and silver, because that's my Steel Cross chapter, but then I can also do a bunch of AdMech, and they're like a red color, so it's a totally different kind of thing. And then there's a lot of other, like, grungy and dusty and Mars dirt stuck all over their cloaks or whatever. And then I can maybe do something cool like a Vindicare Assassin, and then I can even start thinking about maybe some Imperial Guard. Being able to have all those different choices from a hobby aspect, I think, is great. And it's something that's really one of the many things that's pulled me back into 8th edition 40k.